I got this jewelry armoire for free from another dealer at the antique shop. They were kindly giving it away, so I jumped at the opportunity. The top drawer is broken, but I know I can fix it. I start off by cleaning it with a mixture of vinegar and water. There is a tiny bit of an odor to this. It's nothing awful. I think it's just a little bit of perfume. So I actually use my water and vinegar mixture to clean the velvet too. I just spray over it. I don't soak it, but I spray over it and wipe. And if that doesn't work, then I'm gonna use some baking soda, sprinkle it on there, and then vacuum afterwards. But I think it'll be okay with just the vinegar and water. I want to remove all the hardware from this before I make it over so that I can do a thorough job. And this hardware, as you can see, it looks a little dull, so it could probably use some spray paint. And I will spray paint that in a black matte finish. Now to further combat that odor, I'm going to use Bonding BOSS in clear. This is a primer, a bonding primer and an adhesive primer. I always like to prime my jewelry armoires and my jewelry boxes. And I like to use the clear one because there's so much fabric on this that if I do get it on the fabric, you're not really going to be able to see it. So I'm going to leave it in real motion so that you can see how carefully I apply my Bonding BOSS. I really want the finish on this to be as if it were sprayed. I want my paint to be very flat with no brush strokes. I just want it to look great. So you have to make sure that your primer, when you're applying it, is also nice and flat. So I'm very careful when I'm applying the primer. And because it does have an odor, I'm gonna also prime the inside, and that'll block that odor. I like to use artist pens to do the detail work, or the really skinny parts. So for that front where the velvet is, I can be a little bit more careful than with my big giant brush. So I just do a little strip with my artist brush, and then I go back with my regular brush. And then also the trim, that real skinny trim, I'll use my artist brush. So now for the paint color, I decided I like this Antebellum blue, but I want it to be really dark and rich. So I'm adding probably 3 parts Antebellum blue to 2 parts Caviar by Dixie Belle Paint Company in their chalk mineral paint line. And as you can see, these products are pretty, they've been well loved. I've used that Antebellum blue so many times. You really do get a lot out of just a little bit. But I didn't close the cap on that very well, so I did have to mix it and mix it and mix it. You just add I add water and then my caviar, and I just mix until there's no chunks. But yeah, that's my deep blue color, and I'm obsessed. I love this color so much. So it was about 3 parts Antebellum blue to 2 parts caviar. I want you to see how much water that I actually use. I sprayed my brush, I sprayed the surface, and that's because when you're using the chalk mineral paint and you mix it with water, it just goes on so smooth. There's virtually no brush strokes. That's why I love this paint so much. I know I always talk about it in all my videos, but I think it's such an important factor when you're painting furniture that you don't have, if you don't want them, you don't have a lot of brush strokes. I don't like using the paint sprayer. I don't like taking everything outside, setting it all up. I guess I'm a lazy painter. I'd rather do it by hand indoors. So this is the way to go. I've tried so many different paint lines, and I always go back to this one because I just love how it applies with the water. So usually I paint the bottom first. I'll flip it upside down and paint the bottom. But I did one side and then I remembered, oh yeah, I gotta flip it upside down. So that's what's going on here. And again, with the little trim, I'm just gonna use an artist brush. I primed that with the clear primer as well. And I'm just being very careful not to hit the fabric. I am going to use two different furniture transfers. The first one is this Manor Swirls by Katja. It's from Redesign with Prima. And it's my first time ever using one of these gold transfers. So there was a little bit of a learning curve for me. I just want to add some of these swirls onto the front. And the transfer came in two different pieces, one top and then one the bottom half. So I cut it up to where I thought I wanted to see it. I did end up having to cut a few more pieces to make the design cohesive and to make it fit onto the piece. Now, I was not expecting this transfer to be actual gold foil. It is, I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I just wasn't thinking. I was thinking it was just a transfer that looked gold. So I was so surprised. And when you're using gold foiling, if you're like scraping too much, you kind of get some of that gold, it spreads. So that did happen for me, and I was having a hard time getting it off the paper. But honestly, I think that's user error because I just didn't know what I was doing here. You know, the first time when you do something, you don't know what to expect. So by the time I got down to the second half of it, it came off super clean and easy. But as you can see here, I have a lot to touch up because a lot of that gold kind of sprinkled all over because I think I was rubbing like way too hard with my my rubbing board thing that it comes with. I'm using paint, the same Antebellum Blue and Caviar, to touch up the swirls and make them look just a little bit sharper. And I have to be very careful when I'm doing this because it can look like big spots of paint. So while it looks like I'm just blobbing spots on there, I do end up going back with like 3 coats and trying to even that design, even that paint back out so it doesn't look like a bunch of splotches of dried paint over it. So now I have this gorgeous furniture transfer from IOD, and I got it on Etsy from this 317 Home Studio, and I just wanted to give them a shout out because they shipped so fast. This was here within a couple of days, which was amazing. This transfer came in as like a book. So I'm going to be able to use this on so many more projects. I'll probably get about 3 projects out of it. It was around $50, and that's pretty expensive. But if you think, and then you cut it in 3s, it's not that bad. I like to get more than 1 project out of my transfers. Even the Katja transfer, I will get 2 projects out of because I saved all those swirls. So on something that could use just a little pop of color, I'll use the rest of those swirls. But I had this design in mind before I started working on this piece. I knew the colors that I wanted to use. I knew I wanted some beautiful red flowers and gold, and I had envisioned that blue color and all of it going together. So the design was a little bit tricky for me because the transfers are very large for the small piece, but it ended up to be kind of perfect. This looks a little hairy scary, like I'm just throwing a transfer in the center on top of the swirls. So there is some extra work I'm gonna have to do to make it all look cohesive. But for now, I'm just getting that transfer on the one flower, and then I'm gonna use a burnishing pad to make sure that there's no bubbles underneath. We don't want any air trapped, and I want to get rid of the halo. But one cool thing about the IOD transfers is they don't leave much of a halo around the transfer. Some do, and you have to remove it with the burnishing pad. But this one really didn't. So now to make that look cohesive and look like it fits, I have to take my paint and sort of look like the flower isn't isn't just sitting on top of the swirls, that it's actually like coming out of the swirls. So I do that by just painting over some of the swirls. And it ends up working out really well at the end. So now to seal this piece, I'm using Dixie Belle's clear coat in satin. And I'm not using my sprayer. Usually I use my sprayer, but since it's such a tiny piece, I am gonna brush it on. So when I'm brushing my sealer on, I wanna be very careful that I'm not overworking the sealer, that I'm painting it in lines. I'm not leaving a bunch of like brush strokes, because if you don't have it on nice and flat and even, it's going to look streaky. So I'm pretty careful about that. And again, I use my artist brush for the small parts and my big brush for the larger parts. And then even for this cabinet part where I have these like the big appliques, that could be really tricky when you're adding your sealer so that you don't have a bunch of streaks. So what I like to do is just go ahead and, you know, add it on there, put it on there, get it in all the crevices because it needs to be sealed. And then I go back, I take my time. I like this sealer because you get a lot of working time with it before it starts to like pull. So then after I get the appliques all done, then I go ahead and just smooth it out. And I'm just gonna do that top centerpiece for now, or else it'll be like totally chaotic. So the top centerpiece, I'm working it until I know that there's not gonna be any streaks. And once that's done, I leave it for about 2 hours, and then I can come back and paint the rest. But see, I'm going back and forth, making sure that I'm not leaving any drips or chunks or anything. And I just did that little top piece, and then I leaned it against the wall to let it dry. And once that top piece is dry, I can continue on to the rest. But I actually do wait the 2 hours because I don't want it to be sticky if I end up touching that top piece. So I did wait a while. I went and did something else, and then actually I think I left it overnight and then came back. So I was a little worried about how the sealer would look over the gold foil, since it's like real gold foil. You know, sometimes the sealer can dull it down, but I was really lucky it didn't. I know Katja uses the Annie Sloan wax, or maybe her wax, but I don't have any of that, and I didn't want to buy it because I don't really use it a lot. So I just thought I'd see how it goes with the sealer, and it was totally fine. I did 2 coats over it, and it still looks real nice and shiny. So now I have to fix this drawer. The top, it's just not lined up. It was stripped. So I cut that excess fabric off, and then I'm just going to use my Type Bond wood glue to glue that piece back on, and then to enforce it, I use 2 air nails on each side. Now I want to tie this all in, and I'm using this antique gold on these little appliques. I'm just going to use it on the raised details. I apply it with my finger. You can apply it with a brush, but I like to kind of just apply it with my finger, get the feel of the piece. And then when I thought, okay, I'm all done, but it didn't look right. It needed something else, so I'm using a wood you bend, and I'm going to do 2 coats of the paint, and then I do seal it, and then I apply it. Since, you know, normally if you add a wood you bend, you're going to add it before you paint the piece, but since I decided to add it afterwards, now I just have to be really careful with my Type Bond wood glue. that I don't get like wood glue all over. And even if I do, you can just spray it with water to get it off, but I'm being extra careful here. And you could use your heat gun to help dry it fast. You can use your heat gun to move the wood you bend to make sure that it's on like perfectly. So I did end up doing that. I just don't have that recorded. I actually did it to speed up the time. And then I'm gonna also add the gold, the vintage gold color to that applique. You remember what we had before, and here it is today. So like I told you, I had this envisioned in my head before I started it, and I did not see, but it definitely reminds me of Beauty and the Beast vibes. And I was not planning on that, but I love it. Let me know what you think. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and I will see you next time.